and we're live with Tiffany here to talk about equal pay and how it affects women and men and families and
Yeah.
children.
hmm And even our society in a whole, I feel like it has a negative effect on it as well down the line. How you doing, Claire? Nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. I was at Speaker's Corner today, so that was fun. I actually had fun, so that was good. And a lot of politics and religion is so mixed up together, and then eventually gender relations pops up, and
hmm
what I found today was I spoke to a wide range of people, liberals, white people, Muslims, and people who don't like Muslims, and Christians,
hmm
and I find that it is really religion that whether you like it or not, has certain
hmm
views of how men and women should behave and how the law should treat men and women. And I was wondering, as a Catholic, or ex-Catholic, I believe, um,
Yeah.
your views on the matter.
Well, I think that I feel that the equal pay um, is a feminist talking point, which is based on false numbers, false information, or information that is misrepresented. So they have this, and this, it doesn't, I don't know if it falls so much into my Catholicism as it does more my, I mean, I suppose it is. The way I was raised with my father, my mom stayed home, and it was a very stable household, right? My mom was always there if I felt ill at school to pick me up, to make me snacks after school, to cook. She was there to tend to the house and my sister and I. My father worked very hard. He provided for us. He was the head of the household, and the environment was really pleasant to grow up in. Um, Now I had friends who had parents who were divorced, or whatever the situation was, where they didn't have the same type of scenario where they would go home after school, nobody would be there. They had to fend for themselves at very young ages, and not saying that they turned out badly because of this, but the situation, I believe, for some children does turn out badly because of the absentee parents in the home for the child. And so back to my original, where I was going with this, the whole pay gap thing is a false. It's a moot point to begin with. It's illegal to pay different people different based on gender. It's against the law, first of all.
Mhm.
Um, Second of all, when they calculate this pay gap, this supposed pay gap, they're not categorizing the jobs in a equal manner. So they're just putting all the jobs into a basket, averaging out what the pay is, and then subtracting, and then that's how they come up with this 76 cents per dollar for women. But I think if we were to assess it in a whole scenario, if we look at all the aspects, if we were to pay our men more, enabling the women to stay home and take care of the family, the the effects from that would be not just only for the children and the family, but the community as a whole. Um, Children that have a stable father who's going to work every day and being a strong male influence for the boys, and for the girls to strive for a husband later in life, will affect
Mhm.
how their future is. That for the community, I'm sure crime would go down. Our children would be uh, a lot more stable in their foundation of it, what they strive to be. It just across the board, I think it would benefit everybody to get more women back to what they're naturally supposed to be doing, which is raising their kids, in my
Or,
opinion.
yes, and being a supervisory influence in the home, because you know mothers might think, oh, nothing much is happening, but it's probably because you are there that nothing much is happening, nothing much bad is happening, you know?
Well, exactly. And then you have the scenarios where you have both parents working, let's say, and then a child gets hurt at school. Then who leaves their job? You know, then you have this conflict that arises between the two, between this, you know, you and your spouse. And then you have, you know, it creates almost a competitive nature, I believe, between a man and a woman as to who is more important with their job duties, whose job is more important than the other. And I can imagine it would create a lot of conflict, which then rolls downhill. You know, I just don't see the way we are structuring things, and based off this whole feminist idea that inequality is making women suffer. No, well, no, I think these feminist viewpoints and talking points and, you know, supposed oppression is making our children suffer, right? And then society suffer down the line. That's just how I that's how I personally see it. It's you know, I'm sure most women disagree with me, but you know, it's better to have
Well,
moms at home, I think.
yes, yes, because children need to feel secure in order to become secure adults. If they're traumatized in childhood, they'll, be neurotic adults who won't do, things that they should do, if,
Correct.
if they're traumatized by some kind of neurosis because something terrible happened and there was no one around, or they were, um, it would have a knock-on effect on how they treat, things in adulthood. And I think it would have it would interfere with their ability to do the right thing or whatever it is. I'm sure of that.
And if you look at the parenting, I feel like parents will oftentimes compensate or overcompensate for their absence with their children in their parenting. So a child gets in trouble, then they have to carry this burden of guilt because they weren't home, they were at work, and then they're not appropriately, um, teaching that child or punishing that child or giving them consequences for their wrongdoing because they have this, deep rooted guilt for not being there for them. And it's, I just feel like it creates a whole onset of potential problems down the line where if you look at the generation, like millennials and the gen whoever whatever they are after that, I forget what they're called. There's this extended period now of adolescence where children are leaving the house much later in life. They're not really motivated to get married. They're not really motivated to do much of anything. And I think that's because parents are babying them. They're not encouraging them to become adults. And part of that could be due to being absent during a big portion of their childhood. I
Yes,
don't
and,
think
and, and one thing too about two parents working is that because they are time poor, that they'll think, I'll make it up to the kid by giving it stuff,
yes,
by giving it expensive toys and designer clothes, and that actually leads to well, designer labels, superficial um, consumption patterns,
yes, yes.
and bullying other kids whose parents are not rich enough to give them designer clothes.
Yes. Yeah, our focus is really, I mean, we've really lost our way with parenting, I feel like. And it's interesting to look at what the how people in their 20s today, what their main priorities are, their goals are. If you were to look at people in their 20s, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, the goals have shifted. A lot of people young adults don't strive to get married and have children anymore. A lot of them say they don't want children ever. Marriage is just a complete, I mean, that's not even a priority for people anymore.
They might want to
And
get married if fornication is forbidden. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think Islam just has all knows which buttons to push in a way.
people don't value their virginity anymore because it's not considered sacred. It's
That people laugh at virgins, don't
Yes,
they?
they do. Yes, they do. They're ridiculed. And it's a shame because, that is something that we should protect and hold sacred. And it's such an influence. I mean, even I can even remember when I was in high school, even, everybody was having sex. And the pressure from other peers it was it was there. I mean, they not so much. I went to Catholic school, so I don't think it was as bad as it was at perhaps at a public school. But I mean, I knew people when I was in middle school who were already sexually active. And
What age was that for the benefit of
well,
British
middle
listeners?
school for us out here is 12 to 13.
Oh dear. Hmm.
Yes. And at those young ages, I knew girls who were sexually active with their boyfriends. I was a very young, um, preteen. I was not at that level with my friends, and it made me uncomfortable, honestly, because I was raised very conservatively. I had very strict parents, and with Catholicism and everything. So I was not that person, but it was just so easy for my friends just to go with these boys leads at such a young age, and they clearly weren't in religious homes. Most of them, I can say, reflecting back now, were from the homes where the parents weren't there after school. That's when these things were taking place. There's
Hmm.
no parents home. They come home after school. They can bring whoever home. Next thing you know, you have 12 and 13-year-old who are sexually active with boys and it's just that's one of those things that we can further avoid if we have the mothers at home. And I don't think that's shameful to raise children and stay home with them. I think we've put a stigma on that. That's not really fair. um,
Yes, and these things cannot be um, measured in economic terms. I mean, yes, I suppose you can say, if a nanny were there and you were paying her X number of dollars or pounds, you can somehow, um, you know, translate it into some kind of value. But why not let the mother who has the child just do all the kinds of things that need to be done in the house for her kids, for her husband, and if she's happy doing that, why should anybody mock her?
right.
And um, but it seems that the government wants to send women out to work.
Well, they do. I believe they do, and it's almost become incredibly self-centered the way we think. We don't have a very long gaze anymore when it comes to the future. Um, this whole women's rights and the feminism and all of this, it's very, in my opinion, it's very self-centered and selfish, and it's not.
Short,
Mm,
it's short-termist, isn't it?
yes, it is. It's for the individual. It's not for the betterment of society as a whole. It's individual needs, and um I yeah, and yes, you do imagine the government wants to have this scenario that you have out here. We have for-profit prisons, and we need to keep them full. Um, Having our workforce, it keeps kids in school and aftercare. There's federal money involved. I mean, there's all sorts of scenarios, I'm sure, that equals dollar signs in the government's opinion when it comes to having employed both parents. But just
But only
overall.
if you measure the success of your nation in terms of GDP. If you took a different criteria, if you
Hmm.
took different criteria of measurement, then you might be quite successful, even though your GDP is low. If you measured the success of your society by how few divorces you have, how few murders you have, how few,
Right.
you know, then you'd be considered quite successful, even though people didn't earn huge amounts of money.
Americans, if you take a look at our where we rank with our education, how we score compared to other countries, we're surprisingly low in a lot of areas that we shouldn't be, especially, believe it or not, reading. Our reading comprehension in this country is horrible. Um, Being who we are, our education should be top notch. I mean, we should be scoring incredibly high in mathematics, in science, in English, compared to the rest of the world, and we're just not. Um, and again, I can attribute a huge portion of that to the fact that kids are parenting themselves with these, being alone in the home with both parents working, sometimes single moms working 2 or 3 jobs.
Oh
I
no.
home
Mm.
alone, kids raising siblings, it's just not, it doesn't equate to a good future for anybody. And it ultimately hurts the
The
entire,
nation.
yes, we're seeing
Because
that
you
now.
lose your competitive edge. If you keep having ever lowering standards of education, then your workforce won't be competitive. You know,
Correct.
um, people supposed to be working in technology, and they don't do technology because if you have a bad school, you won't be doing the sciences, you won't be doing maths, you won't be doing any of the tough subjects, will you?
No.
And
Look at If you look at other cultures, Claire, for instance, if you look at Asian cultures and Hispanic cultures, Spanish cultures, where you have not only, the mother at home, but you have the grandparents there often too, where you have these family homes that include the parents, and there is a huge support system there of adults raising the children.
the extended family, to step in if mum isn't, the good mother she ought to be. If you have mum's mum or, dad's mum or something, so people who, you know, they can help the kid if their parents aren't, doing a good enough job. Um,
Exactly. Exactly. And that those tend to be the more successful children. If you look at the Asian Americans and you rank them across the board in just in earnings and how their children are doing it educationally, they're at the top of every list. Asian Americans are the highest earners in America. Their children have the most college or high school graduation rates who go on to college. I mean, there's a standard there that we should really be looking at, as far as living goes, in my opinion. And um, a lot of it is based, I believe, because I was raised when I was younger. My neighborhood I lived in was, primarily Korean. Um, and if you take a look at how they lived with extended family and their focus on education and working hard, there's a reason why they're such successful people. Um, and I think that's, our culture has lost that drive and the focus on family too, especially, Claire, I don't know how it is in the UK, but out here we kind of discard our elderly. Mom and dad get old and they wind up in an old folks home.
so same it's I think it's happening all over the world. Not, because even in China, people have to be reminded to visit their parents, but then, people in China have to move long, far away from home. So I guess it makes it harder for them to visit their parents. But the whole idea is that it is a pain. Looking after children is a pain. Looking after our aging parents is a pain. But who else would we trust to look after them?
Right,
Not
right.
ourselves. And ultimately, it's all about, it's almost inescapable that we have to do these things, because if we don't, there will be consequences for our society.
Well,
And
that, yeah.
beginning with that is that we have to marry a member of the opposite sex in order to have children. Pain, inconvenience, cramping lifestyle, um, And it's already hard enough without the government saying, hey, you don't have to do that. You can be gay. You can, have a
Yes.
pet or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
But
You don't even have to be a female anymore. You can, if you don't like being a female, you can now be a male. It's your choice. And we'll recognize that not only as, in society, but with the government. I believe they just issued the first non-binary passport out here where this person has no gender. It's like, what's the point of that? What are they accomplishing by this? It's just such a foolish waste of energy and resources. They had to pass that law. They had to, I mean, just like who the heck is doing these things is what I want to know. Why is this even a topic? It's so bizarre to me when we should be promoting a
sensible things.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
What's
And you
what's
think,
more?
why is it happening? Is there some evil force, or, is it just a case that if it's a falling fence, people will just push at it, for no other reason that they see it's falling. So they see if it will fall if they push it.
I
I
think it's easier to control people who feel marginalized and who feel that they are a minority, who are compartmentalized, who feel that they, I think having these categories and groups, it makes it a lot easier to weaken people, in my opinion, and make them feel less than or different. And I think that's kind of what they're going for, is what I feel like. I mean,
I
I
don't. Yeah. I mean, some people assume that there is an evil agenda. People are really planning this and, wanting to reduce our numbers. But I wonder sometimes whether, there will be, forces of chaos who will just try things out just for the fun of it. I don't know if you listen to Vincent Bruno.
I do.
And he seems to be the personification of, well, it's not illegal, so we can do it, and it's not forbidden, so we can think it and say it and promote it, because he thinks it would be fun to try.
Yeah, Vince, I think Vince has, he's interesting. I give him credit for being so well versed on this eugenic utopia he wants to live in. I mean, he
And to
definitely,
be so creative too. But I mean,
yes.
I don't think he means evil, although would have evil consequences if he were to get his way. But I think as far as he's concerned, he doesn't see any harm in it. So, and it's not forbidden for him to say or promote these things. So he does it.
Yeah, I think his overall agenda, if you will, no, I agree. I don't think he's sinister or trying wants to eliminate the people who don't go along with it. I just think he imagines a perfect world for him, and that's what it looks like. That's his utopia. That is his Zion, if you will, right?
Mm,
And
mm.
he just seems to have a appetite for certain things that's the only way it's going to be satisfied. I don't know. He's funny though. He's funny. But yeah, as far as the depopulation and all that, Claire, I used to think people who believed in that were kind of a little bit fringe, kind of nuts, until I started watching these lectures on transhumanism and the advances that they've made, and these professionals and doctors and scholars debate these things, and we're already there.
I'm not even sure what transhumanism is.
That is incorporating human life with artificial life and extending a person's life beyond what it's naturally capable of withstanding. So it's basically the extension of life through artificial means. Um,
What, like having a pig's heart in your heart, for
no,
example?
no, it's more. I'm trying to think how to explain this simply. It's more being able to preserve your body, your vessel, to outlive what it normally could. So whatever the means are, I don't know whether that's, you're recreated through a artificial intelligence and through a robot, they make a clone of you, or if they're able to inject you with some sort of something, to keep you alive longer. And when you think about it, the more we progress in this, the less necessity we are going to have for so many people, right? Because my argument to this depopulation in the past was always, well, we have to have people because we need people to do certain things. The elites aren't going to wipe everybody out. Who's going to clean their house? Kind of point.
Yeah, you need slaves.
Basically, yes, you do. You need the lower job laborers to do the things that the elites types don't want to do. I mean, that's just, it's common sense.
And I think we still need to do that. Because I think our ruling classes are saying, we don't want to even we don't even want to have the bother of talking to, trade unions and that sort of thing. It's too much trouble. Let's all have driverless cars and trains, so we don't even have to talk to them.
Right. Right.
We don't even have to, work out ways of persuading them or whatever. So I think really human progress has come about through having youth bulges sometimes. I think we're somehow, whether we like it or not, we have to compete against each other in our own society, and also with different countries. There will be national competition, and we're just roped into it whether we like it or not, because that is the only way humans progress.
Yes, that is exactly it. And it's funny you say that. I was just talking to somebody about this earlier. Equality is really a misguided hope for society. Equality is impossible. We simply cannot live with, amongst one another in a completely, totally equal manner. We have to have different classes. We have to have, like you said, this competitive human drive with one another to progress, and so it kind of cracks me up with, there's, it used to be Agenda 21. I believe it's Agenda 2030 now, and their tick sheet of goals to have in place by year 2030 is absolutely ridiculous. They want to end poverty and they want to feed everybody. Well, okay, that's nice. I mean, we could have done this years ago. There's enough food and money to alleviate some of these problems, but there's a reason why we don't. And that reason is we have to have social structure, and we have to have this these different levels of classes amongst our people to keep things working. It's just the way it has to be. But yeah, it's
rich people need poor people, and poor people need rich people. Rich people need poor people to do the work that they'd rather not do, and poor people need rich people to pay them.
We are eliminating the middle class, though. I mean, that is something that is slowly starting.
Yeah, because they started eliminating the working classes, right? In the West, it started in the UK with Thatcher saying, she basically destroyed the manufacturing base, because the unions were so much trouble, the miners' strike, and they relocated the manufacturing base in other countries because the labor was cheaper, and then eventually everything went to China because that was the way to go, and they didn't care that the working classes had been eliminated. And when they were eliminated, they were wealthy enough to just pay them to, watch daytime TV and never work, and import cheap immigrant labor. And they thought that was how they could get the problem. And it was just easier to do that, and then call them racist if they complained. But really, the only way to deal with it is say, if you don't like immigration, then you have to work harder and have more babies. And teach them in school better. But you see, even the anti-immigration parties were too scared or too dishonest to tell their supporters that is what they have to do. or they blame the Jews or whatever,
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear it. See, nobody wants to talk about this because of the fear of being, labeled X, Y, or Z. I mean, it's really ridiculous because these are very logical and you would think productive talking points that people should be having amongst one another, but they just don't do it because, I mean, especially out here, you say one wrong thing and the next thing you know, you're I mean, look at what
no
happens
more
with
dinner party invitations or something.
it's really bad. But these are logical things to be discussing, and they all kind of fall into the same main boat of problems when you strip them away from their details, and that's the fact that we have taken God out of government. We have taken our moral obligation to a higher power out of the way we lead our people and govern our people. And I think that's when things really started to go downhill and we started
Yes,
pushing the
because
envelope.
actually God is, whether he exists or not, is a necessary process and thinking, because you you need you need the idea of objective truth to be accepted. Otherwise, we'll just be saying, you have your opinion and I have mine. What makes what makes your opinion better than mine, kind
Hmm.
of thing, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's just a necessary process. Whether we, but it's like, well, somebody knows, even if we don't. Somebody can do it, even if we can't.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, God, you don't even have to believe in God necessarily to have a responsibility to God, if that makes sense. You could look at God and you could call God as being the encompassing moral integrity of people in general and as a whole. What are our principles, all of our basic just decency? How do you wrap that all up into one word? Who are we accountable to? It could just be, God could be a lot of things to individuals. It doesn't have to be, specifically just God. It's just, I think people need to have something they're accountable to. Um,
yes,
to
they need to accept that there is something higher than them, because we're always okay. I mean, I'm legally trained, so but I think everybody knows that you have some legal matter you wanted decided, so you go to the lower courts and you go to the high court and then you go to the appeal court and then you go to the Supreme Court. It's that kind of process, and then if you imagine the situation in which you still don't get justice, even though you've gone to the Supreme Court, there is this theoretical justice above the Supreme Court that didn't give you justice, and it's okay. It's theoretical, right? It's
hmm.
but we need that idea of perfect justice,
Hmm.
even the one that we don't get in this life or on this earth, to talk about objective truth and perfect justice,
Hmm.
so that we know what it is, in theory anyway. And
Well, we're lost without that. People are truly lost without having that higher power. I mean, it's who is supposed to be governing the entirety of our world, right? It's
mm,
the thing we all have to answer to, the entity we all have to answer to, and it's a hard God is a hard thing to. I was raised so religious. My father, Claire, was actually he was a Christian youth pastor when I was very, very young. He wound up leaving the church. I was raised Catholic, but he had his day in the Christianity, and he left the church because of the hypocrisy um, behind the main pastor was having an affair with his secretary, and I was very little, maybe 5 years old, but I still remember the day he came home when he found out about it, and he was so upset.
mm.
And he kind of swore off Christianity at that point. He said, it's just, this is a big group of hypocrites trying to soothe their own wrongdoings by going to church. Now, he's gone back to the Christian faith in a different way, but he's a lot more faithful than he is religious now. I can tell the difference with him. And there's a sense of peace that he has now that I'm happy for him that he has this. But that kind of when that statement he made, though, when he found out and he was so just disenchanted by the whole thing, that's kind of what we need. We need to have that ability to answer to something, somewhere, right, for our wrongdoings. We have to have something to keep us in check. That's why we can't abolish government. Nobody could handle themselves. It's
Yes. Yeah. Because we need laws to control us. We need laws to protect us from each other.
That's just it. Just like we need a parent at home to raise our kids, right?
And therefore, if we are to have laws, we should choose the best moral system that allows the group to remain in existence. And this would be religion, wouldn't it? I mean, okay, I talk about moral systems, and moral systems include religions, and they also include secular political ideologies, because the Marxists and fascists and Nazis, I mean, they once upon a time thought that their idea was better than all the others. So, whether we like their ideas or not, the intention when they conceived of their political ideology was to say, well, this is better than everything that has gone on before. Let's try it. And they did, and it didn't really work, because I think it's something to do with gender relations and how the secular political ideologies don't value the family and don't value marriage and treat it as, well, something that can be played around with. And then, eventually they kind of mess up their societies by saying no fault divorce is a good thing. Lots of things that prevent people from having good marriages are good things. That's what they say. And then it's so bad that they say, well, marriage is a bad thing. People are too many people around. And the thinking is so twisted now that it takes a long time to, untangle what,
to sort it out, right?
Yeah.
Claire, what do you feel about gay marriage? Now, although that doesn't really fit into necessarily your society with secular Quranism, but as far as I do believe there are individuals who are born homosexual, and it's not really a choice. I was talking about my cousin earlier on Daniel's stream, who I referred to him. He was a gay baby, and he really just was. He was, as a baby, you could tell he was. It sounds bizarre, but you could tell he was gay. And I actually support the idea, because it points in the direction, and it lays the foundation of monogamy and family and a more responsible lifestyle, I think.
I think, there's nothing to prevent gay people from, making contracts with each other. But before there was even the civil partnership in the UK, there was a legal device called a mutual will, which is basically two people bequeathing their property to each other, whoever died first. And although this was something I learned at law school, I remember my gay hairdresser saying that was what he'd done with his partner. So
I didn't know you went to law school.
Make legal commitments to each other, and in fact, in China, they have gay rights. I know it surprises a lot of people, but
really,
there are too many men in China, so the Chinese government already knows that there will be lots of men who won't find a wife. So they have to cater for these people, for these bare men, basically.
Well, they kind of
And
created that
therefore they
problem,
have
didn't
gay rights.
they?
They
Yeah.
don't call it gay rights, they don't call it gay marriage, but, it's some kind of, alternative, um, like, next of kin visiting people in hospital when you're, this idea of next of kin.
Hmm.
So they won't have a problem of, one gay partner is in hospital on his last legs, and he won't be excluded by by the family of the person, seriously ill.
Right.
If that they bother to make a contract and say, this person is my next of kin, and he can come and visit me, and my family can't just tell him to go away, that kind of thing.
That whole situation in China kind of baffles me because I can't understand the thought process behind it, especially when they saw the fact that families were abandoning their baby girls, um, for having the preferential boy to carry on the lineage. I it just kind of shocks me that they didn't have the foresight to see where this was going to lead eventually with having so many young men and not enough girls to supply them with wives. I mean
Yeah,
that just kind of aged.
I'm surprised too. It's like, you just have to think about it and then realize you're going to have more men. But okay, I think in the olden days, they wanted more men, and the government was okay with that because, if you have too many men, labor is cheap, you can send them into the army to fight your imperial wars and acquire more land and
Mhm.
territory and that sort of thing. But they forgot that, if most of these men are only children of parents, then you can't just sort of send them to die in some war or whatever, because their parents won't put up with it. I mean, the only way this kind of thing might work if most people had a big family and they can afford to give up a daughter or a son to the priesthood, to the nunnery, and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But if it's only one child, then it's you're gonna get very upset if your only child dies, right?
So in the past, a lot of these lives, they didn't count on them surviving as long as they are now, basically, because there was more
They're
loss of
all in
life.
trouble, Tiffany. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not just China, Japan. They went on the pill, and then now they're closing hospitals and schools because the birth rate has declined so dramatically. They have
Yeah.
problems in Korea. They have, the whole of the Far East. Because really, when we think about it, even married parents don't want to have a child every time they have sex, right? They don't. Because,
Right.
I mean, the full horror of how many children we might have if every time we had sex, we had a kid,
Oh
you know,
God. Yeah. No, thank you. I don't think you should have more kids than you have arms, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Once you go past two, you have two arms, and once you have that third child in the mix, it just everything becomes a nightmare. I've seen it with my friends, where they're by the time they're on their fourth child, it's just hell. Two's good. That's just my opinion, but well, the birth rate even in America has dropped significantly.
yeah,
You know,
but people think, oh, well, it's not, if it's not good enough, we'll just import labor. But yeah, you can import labor, but then things will start changing and people will start complaining,
mhm.
and here you are at this sort of situation. Um, but perhaps it was, now that we think about it, it was entirely predictable that this was what would happen if we break these rules of marriage and good parenting and you know gathering ourselves into family groups to look after each other. Um, and now we're all reliant on the state and we can't get on with anybody at all, which is why so many people marry their pets because
Or
we hate other humans now. Um,
those are fun groups. what do they call them? The people who are
Transhumanism.
yeah, they do. No, but there's a specific group of people who have a sexual attraction to objects. Have you seen them? Where they fall in love. There's a guy who fell. It's bizarre. There's a guy out there who married the Eiffel Tower. Another woman married her fence post. I mean, these people are.
Really, I haven't heard of that one.
There's a documentary on these folks. I will send it to you. They are truly bizarre. They are. God, I wish I could remember. This is going to bug me, but anyways, I mean that's where we're heading. It's not
Well,
good.
please do. I'd be very interested. But you see, I think these things happen because of some fundamental misconception or error about the state of the world. And
Right.
I think the Chinese are in trouble because they've just discovered this year. It's like, oh my God, we just cancelled the one-child policy, but nobody wants to have babies anymore. It's like, please have more babies, and all these Chinese parents saying, "No, one is enough. We can hardly
I
manage
think
the
I
one
got
we have."
used to it. Well, and there's not enough women to breed now either. I mean, these women all grew up and they were the only child. It changes the culture. It'll
Yeah,
change
because it's
the.
actually dysgenic to have a society of one child
Yes.
families because they're even called little emperors.
Yes.
These children, because they just they're so entitled and
Entitled.
so
Yes.
insufferable. Because they know they've got two parents who serve their needs and everything's going to
Right.
come to them anyway.
And you think about it, the pressure on that one child too to succeed and everything else. I mean, they really changed an entire culture by doing that. It was severely damaging, I think. And
It's actually dysgenic. They haven't realized how dysgenic it is to
it,
have a
it,
society. It's like,
and they're
what if
just
the kid is no good? Then you're fucked, right?
right. You're
You-
completely fucked. And they're just starting to see the backlash from this, right? They're just now starting to see like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
It's like they woke up one day and they said, well, this isn't working out well, but down the
And
line, this is.
every generation, every 16 years, the population halves.
Yes.
If you think it's bad in the West, just see what's going to happen to China. Because if they kept the one-child policy going, then every generation, the population halves, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
logically.
Yeah, it does. And yeah, I mean, it's going to take them decades and decades to hopefully repopulate if they can. I mean, it's the cultural changes that became because of this. I mean, it's just really, it was what, I mean, you
Yeah,
talk about.
yeah. Listen to before I forget. So
Yeah.
the past week, there's this program on BBC Radio 4 about the population rethink. So they were talking about aging societies and youth bulges, and then they were talking about China, and they were saying like China, it's like, oh, they're in such a bad situation. Yeah, they can think of immigration and importing cheap labor, but they would need about 400 million immigrants to come and serve their needs. It's like it's not even possible, and even if they wanted to, there aren't all that immigrants to import into China.
Exactly. Hold on one second for me, Claire. Hold on.
I don't know what you're complaining about, Stephen James. But yeah, you're in the UK, so do have a listen to the population series this week with Amal Rajan. It's quite interesting, quite gloomy, and but worth listening to. And basically, the long and short of it is that only Africa has a youth bulge. So I guess the Africans are going to take over the whole world because everybody's basically shot themselves in the foot. But particularly the Chinese, and it's like, they don't know what's happened to them. They won't know what's happened to them.
Sorry, Claire, my kids were out riding bikes and everybody just came home. So I'm probably going to have to step away here and get to my motherly duties. But it was a pleasure speaking with you. I love these topics. They're really interesting.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I hope we can revisit the subject again when you are free.
Yes, yes,
That would be great.
absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, and we'll speak again soon.
Okay. Take care, Tiffany. Thanks for
Okay, you
coming.
too. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, we didn't actually discuss the subject of equal pay, but before the stream started, Tiffany was agreeing with me as a white middle class college educated mother that equal pay was bad for women ultimately because it means that they can't find a husband who is capable of supporting a family with one wage. And maybe that is what most women deep down really want. And I hope to have further conversations with Tiffany about this sort of thing. I'm grateful to have met somebody white, middle class, and educated, capable of acknowledging these facts of life about what women really want from men and how society should be arranged to bring us back to the stability and affluence that some of us remember or were fortunate enough to enjoy in our childhoods. Stephen James, what do you mean? Well, I'll have a look, but I have been a bit busy. And about your video about raising a boy. It's hard raising a girl too. What do you mean it's getting a little solipsistic here? What do you mean by that? Stephen James, a normal dude is not ever just going to start sucking dick because he's bored. Well, for some reason I think of millennial woes who went through a gay phase, right? So, well, I've spoken to men who say, gay men who say, well, it just seems easier than having to deal with women. I mean, gay sex is a form of cheap sex, because really, even in a patriarchy, married sex is the most expensive form of sex at all. And that was why, religion would forbid, any kind of marriage substitute. It's like, you have to have sex with your spouse and no one else, because that having sex with anyone else would be a sexual offense and you will be punished and you will be disgraced. You better not. And so people, would marry and only have sex with their wives or feel that that's the only respectable, allowable, legal thing to do. Should I start a different stream about my day at Speaker's Corner? I think I will. I must respect the content of the stream because it's about Tiffany and the fact that she's white, middle class, college educated, and agrees with me about the abolition of equal pay. Thank you very much for listening, and talk to you again very soon.